Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
Hello and welcome to Impact Teams Radio. This is your host and guide, Tony Sherman, and this week got a great treat for you. We have Martin Plumlee with us. Martin, thank you so much for being on the show.
Tony, thanks for having me.
Oh, such a pleasure. So for those of you listening, I hope you have a great episode because Martin and I tried to record this a number of weeks ago and it just didn't work. So Martin was gracious enough to say, hey, I still want to talk to your listeners. I want to come back. And so this is take 2. So Martin and I should be on our A game today. Wouldn't you agree, Martin?
I agree 100%.
Okay, so Martin, let me step away from the mic and just ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners so they get a sense of what a decent guy you are.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tony. Well, just a very quick bio. I live in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm a Nashville, Tennessee native. Been very fortunate in my career to do a number of things, but what's really shaped my career is 4 formative years at West Point, the U.S. Military Academy in New York, and to this day, I'm very fortunate to serve part-time in the Army Reserves. So I like to tell people I'm a leader, and I'm a leader in business, in recruiting, and certainly in the military. And in a nutshell, that's a little bit about me. Of course, I have a great family, a wife, a young daughter, and very blessed to have a son to be born here in about 7 weeks. So. Oh,
congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Oh, awesome. So we caught you at the right time because in 7 weeks' time, your spare time is going to be like gold dust, isn't it?
Absolutely. This will be few and far between, so this is a great time.
Okay, so guys, we're listening to a well-rested Martin. 2 months' time, maybe not so much. So, Martin, okay, let's jump into the show. And I wonder if you've got a quote for us that we can shape the show round.
Absolutely. My favorite quote, I use this on a pretty regular basis, Tony, is "Don't give up, don't ever give up." This was made famous in 1993 by Jimmy V. His full name is Jim Valvano. He was the head coach of North Carolina State men's basketball, and in 1983 they achieved one of the landmark upsets in tournament history, where they defeated a highly favored University of Houston team. Fast forward to 93 time frame, Mr. Valvano had cancer and ultimately passed away just a few months later after making this famous speech at the ESPYs. But this quote resonates with me, and I think it's very powerful because this guy in his waning days was all about cancer research and trying to make life, extend life, or hopefully solve cancer, the problem of cancer. And just what a testimony to true courage and finally facing the battle of your life. And Jimmy V was focused on others, and that to me is just powerful.
It is, isn't it? And of course, as leaders in business, I mean, that's a resonating quote anyway, especially if you're in the customer services area.
For sure, without a doubt.
So with this Nashville Spin, are you a country music fan or are you heavy metal? What are you?
Tony, I tell you that they don't call it Music City for nothing. And Nashville is great, certainly well known around the world for country music, but also the Christian music industry is based here. And I love a lot of Christian music. I love most of country music, but being an 80s kid, I certainly love bands from that time frame, Journey, Foreigner, to name a few. But I will say, let the record reflect, I'm not a big fan of the hair bands, the glam bands from the late 80s, early 90s. Not my thing.
So actually, Journey, Foreigner, I can resonate with. I am not a country person. Old country, new country, I'm just not a country person. My kids are, my wife is, it just doesn't resonate with me. Actually, I'm a Motown geek. Well, I like Journey and Foreigner, but I'm a Motown geek.
Well, I can appreciate that. My wife is from Dearborn, obviously, suburb of Detroit, so we definitely listen to some Motown from time to time.
So just before we get into the meat and potatoes of this, I wonder if you being in the military, if you served overseas or anything, have you got any unique experiences that you can share with us?
I'd be glad to. Of course, Tony, very, very honored to have served both active duty and now as a reservist. I've been very fortunate to travel to countries like Italy, Botswana, Korea, and most recently, was in the state of Kuwait. Our unit deployed over there summer of 2013, and we returned back to the States in mid-February of 2014, so just about 6 months ago. And what an exciting experience. I'm a military police officer in the reserves, and over there in Kuwait, we actually ran the military's only correctional facility for all branches of the service. I could tell you some stories. And as our schedule permitted, we collaborated and trained with our allies, and really is a nice way to form a bond with people you don't really know much about. And I will tell you this, I believe every American should spend at least 6 months in a foreign country, giving back in some capacity. Perspective is certainly a beautiful thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can't imagine how good that must be, but I'm sure it must have been a great experience. So, obviously, Martin, you're the kind of guy who's packing a lot into your life so far. As you look over the arc of your career, share with our listeners one or two of the satisfying wins that you've had.
Happy to, Tony. I'm going to go back to that Ed Harris, Gene Kranz quote made famous in the movie Apollo 13. Back in 2003, during my capstone business plan presentation at the end of a 6-week training program with GE Healthcare, I confidently stated to our executives that my team locally in East Tennessee, we would win a major customer renewal. In fact, our largest customer renewal. And just 6 months later, happened to be on my birthday, we closed a $22 million contract with this particular client. Of course, this was very satisfying to me for two reasons. Number one, this was a major revenue stream, resulted in job security for over 20 local personnel. And then number two, this victory showed the power of a team that developed a strategic and actionable plan that we were fortunate to execute each and every step to the client's satisfaction. And of course, this culminated with a fantastic win. And if I may, in 2007, when I was back in recruiting, I personally partnered with a client that my colleagues had actually written off. This firm had a very significant recruiting challenge, standing up an entire new department. We pulled together our team and helped them hire, onboard, and assimilate almost 60 people in 3 months. I'm very proud to say that the retention rate a year later was 92%. And I'm still very proud of this project over 7 years later. In my opinion, the ultimate takeaway, your next windfall account might be closer than you realize. You should treat every customer or potential customer special.
So, actually, let's unpack a couple of those, because I remember last time we spoke about this, Martin, something that you said, which really resonated with me, was, having on that GE account where you predicted 6 months down the line, $22 million, and you nailed it as the timeline came in. You were talking about having a strategic plan and operating to the strategic plan, daily doing the block and tackle of the tactical stuff. And then you said something which is I've used a number of times since we last spoke.
Okay.
And you said executing to standard. And that really resonated with me. It's one thing to have a strategic plan, which people can do. It's another thing to have a tactical plan and actually execute to it, which most people don't do. But I think the secret sauce for a leader or somebody who wants to become a leader in corporate America is not only the block and tackle of tactical execution, but executing to the standard. I like that.
Well, I appreciate that, Tony, and certainly we had a great team, and that was absolutely huge. But where I focused my time and effort was on those executive relationships, and that paid off. But each and every day, you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to say, did we do this well? And if we didn't, what can we do better going forward? And taking that time for call it self-analysis, self-awareness, in the Army, of course, we call it an after-action review. That's the only way to get better. And I believe that, and I try to live that every single day.
So I would also say, as well as that, I think, was it Aristotle or Plato that said an unreflected life isn't worth living? And effectively, you're saying that in modern parlance, aren't you?
No, I would have to agree with that. If I can tie myself to Plato or Aristotle, I will do that.
So with the standard thing, I would think that reflects into the second win that you shared with us about standing up 60 people in 3 months. Because what was the retention rate after a year?
Over 90%. Actually came in at 92%.
So again, that must be a very demonstrable reflection of executing to standard.
I would agree, and certainly I believe the key there, if you want to call it the secret sauce, the client really entrusted us and allowed us to come in and understand the dynamic, the changing culture of their environment, what they were trying to build. We had relationships with the CFO, with the local CEO, and ultimately, once people understand how committed they were and how, it was really a dual reciprocation, if you will, of commitment, it was just simply outstanding, and it really inspired our team to go above and beyond. And I think that really was the key to success.
Oh, absolutely. So I just want to dig into this one step further, because obviously what we want to do is prepare our listeners to succeed in corporate America. So if we take this preparing and executing to standard, how do you reflect standard in a plan? How do you make sure your team knows the standard to execute to? Because I can see the fact that it's easy for you to have personal high standards and use those on daily reflection. But if you're going to hold your team to a standard, at some way, I think as a good leader, you need to articulate whatever the standard is in whatever the situation.
Most definitely. I'll give you a couple quick thoughts. In the military, we call it initial counseling. So anytime you have a new leader arrive to your unit, a new soldier, or you're transitioning into a new job, it's all about laying out the job duties and responsibilities as well as the performance expectations and standards. And once again, whether it's business or military, I believe in certain instances, the leaders don't always take the time to set the tone, lay out the proper expectations, because you can't hold people accountable if they don't know what's expected of them from day one. And that should happen day one, no later than day two, when that person joins the team or the organization. People want to know what are my boundaries? What are the goals? Help me understand how I can be successful. And to me, that's how you get it done, and that's how you inspire people to go make that extra effort, right? Work an extra hour today. Put in an hour on the weekend if need be. But that's how you get people bought into the process and the goals and objectives, is help them understand where we're going and what your part in this. And, hey, ultimately this is what's expected, and this is what we need from you to get this done.
Yes, and I think also if you I find when I'm talking to people and I'm setting a standard, I'm saying, what do you think the best way to execute this would be? And then if they give you something that you find an acceptable standard, you can tie their integrity to that. And you can say, okay, I'm expecting you to deliver that standard. Is that something you can commit to?
I think that's an excellent approach. I agree 100%.
So obviously, you've had a number of fairly major wins in your career today, but not everything on the road of leadership development is straightforward. It's never a smooth path, and most of us learn probably more from our failures or struggles than from our wins. So why don't you share with our listeners one or two struggles that you've had along the way?
Be happy to. Obviously, in the recruiting business certainly ties very much, Tony, to the broader economy. And I can personally tell you, in less than 2 years, my position was eliminated on 2 separate occasions. And then my next employer declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy after I joined the organization after about 10 months. I will tell you this. I love being a leader, a business person, and a headhunter. And no matter what has transpired over 11-plus years in recruiting, I've managed to have fun every single day. Obviously, some days are funner than others, just like any industry or any business. My advice to your listeners, do not allow economic circumstances, big companies, other variables to keep you down. Feed your passion and maintain and grow that daily determination. But like in my instance, I will tell you, sometimes you get a kick in the pants, maybe even a couple of those, and you have to stretch yourself, and you have to maybe step out in faith, do something different, such as opening your own business. And I will tell you this, I'm personally very fortunate to have a great spouse. You may have business partners based on what you're doing. That is certainly priceless. So I would just take a quick second to highlight my great partner and wife, Amy. She's been 1,000% supportive of me over the last couple of years.
So that's from an entrepreneurial perspective that you've got, and they say behind every successful man, there's a great woman. And obviously, Amy's the great woman in this equation.
Amen to that. I definitely I drew the long straw on this one. She might have drawn the short straw.
So did you find when you were working in corporate America, when you're working for GE, did you find having a good spouse as useful then as when you're self-employed?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to actually flip that, because when I worked for Johnson & Johnson and GE Healthcare, I did not have a spouse. But now I'm on the other side of that. Amy works for Nissan North America at their corporate headquarters, just a couple of miles from our home. And so I am now on the other side of that, supporting her, listening to what's going on with their organization and the challenges they face and how they're developing their leaders and their teams. So I'm hopefully in that facet, if you will, trying to pay it back to Amy, because that's where I can be supportive and add some value to her thinking and her process.
And that's really good to hear you say that, because that's exactly how my wife Siobhan and I work. Is in both of our careers, we don't just listen to how the day went.
Right.
We try to actively engage and give nuanced advice and remember what the conversations were before, because I think if you got two people working on two independent careers, you can have the output of three professionals if you work together well.
I like that. I will share that with Amy tonight when I catch up with her. That's great. I love that.
So okay, so in terms of personal struggles, when you were within GE or in your corporate environment or in the military, have you ever had a situation where you've had to go through a leadership struggle and you've come out the other side and you've learned from that kind of experience?
I can certainly recall a few years ago, I was given some feedback about how I was actually setting expectations and giving feedback to my team, and actually had the opportunity to go through some executive coaching. I did that for probably about 6 weeks, 4 or 5 different sessions. And that was invaluable to learn. Again, it's not just how you're doing things, but it's how you're perceived. And we're all individuals. People come from different backgrounds, and it's important to always relate one-on-one with each of your team to understand what makes them tick, what's going to push them in the right way to go above and beyond what they perceive to be their own boundaries or skill set. So I would tell you that was humbling in some ways, but yet I looked at it as an opportunity to grow and improve and be a better leader.
That makes a lot of sense, because I'll tell you what, Martin, we've had on the show recently a number of people who've either had strong executive coaching or are in the executive coaching area, and the value of coaching for accelerating your development is highlighted again and again on this show. So yeah, that definitely resonates. So as you grow as a leader, as you take those ideas and you move them forward, how did you have mentors, or did you do this organically? I mean, to some extent you're different, because West Point is all about inculcating leadership into the individual from day one. But once you left West Point, did you get any mentorship? Did you get focused leadership training other than the executive coaching?
Oh, absolutely. Obviously, being an Army Ranger, that was 72 of the longest days and nights of my life. I was very fortunate to have a Ranger buddy, Tim Roach. Him and I struggled through, but made it through. He's one of my classmates from West Point. So over the years, obviously, Tony, through GE, through J&J, other great companies have had all kinds of formal training. But ultimately, I do want to highlight one great mentor, and he sticks out to this day. I have a personal relationship with Frank Helming and stay in contact with him. I worked he made it to the rank of Lieutenant General in the Army. I worked for General Helming from 1998 to 1999 at the Ranger Training Brigade, obviously where Ranger School is held. And he was at a point in his career where General Helming, he was in Colonel Helming, didn't realize or didn't think he would be able to keep progressing in his career. Well, I can tell you, fast forward over a decade and sustained conflicts and wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he made it all the way to Lieutenant General. And I will tell you, in my humble opinion, his success was due to he literally had a laser-type focus on challenging his soldiers, but also caring for them in the right way, as well as their families. Ultimately, General Helmet retired as the commanding general of Fort Bragg and the 18th Airborne Corps, obviously one of the Army's most visible leadership roles. His lead-by-example approach and his adherence to the highest standards, they really continue to guide me 15 years from when I first met him. So General Helmick's certainly one of my mentors and one of my heroes.
And that is blatantly obvious in the way you talk about it. Your voice resonates with him. I can almost see you looking 20% bigger as you talk about him. You obviously hold the man in the highest of regard.
He is a class. He's a family man, and I can just look back to the days of obviously working directly for him, and it's just amazing that I was fortunate enough to serve with him and work with him, and I certainly count it a blessing.
Great. So I've just looked at the time. We've really run out of time here, Martin. But before we do, you've mentioned a number of times, and you've inferred a number of times as well, or implied, sorry, that you're reflective in your day. Have you spent your day wisely? So can I just ask you, as a way of closing out, can you share with our listeners what your personal metrics are when you sit back and you reflect on your day? How do you make sure that you're using the day wisely, and if you haven't, that you make tomorrow better than today?
I'd love to. First and foremost, Tony, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I clearly state right up top, bottom line up front, I'm a servant leader, and I want to be a family man, and I am a family man. So my first question or thing I like to reflect on is, did I spend quality time today with both my wife and my daughter, and soon to add a son to the mix? Do I get this right every day? I don't, but I want to get it right every day, and I make it a point to do the very best that I can. As far as more of a business metric, if you will, success for today, I like to ask myself a simple question. How did I grow my business today? Did we gain some traction with our current customers, current orders? And what did we do well today? How can we leverage that going forward? And then looking ahead a little bit, success maybe for tomorrow, what did I do today in my business to help us grow for the future? I believe we must always make time every single day to plant seeds for that next week, that next month. It might be at 5:30 in the morning, and it might be 9 o'clock at night, but never lose sight of what's coming down the road.
Okay, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously you're doing it as somebody who's growing his own business, but you can do that in any role in life.
Absolutely.
For me, the question is, a lot of times when I'm in corporate America, I turn around and say, did I help my boss? Did I help my team? Whose day did I make better because I interacted with them?
That's right.
I mean, it can be as simple as that. Because, again, and you've mentioned it a few times, but I really do think, and part of my daily planning every day is I have to have a list of people that I'm going to reach out to that day, because I think the currency of life, and definitely the currency of a successful business, is relationships.
I concur 1,000%.
So anyway, obviously both of us can go on. So Martin, I just want to thank you so much for not only spending the time with our listeners today, but be willing to come back and fail first. We didn't give up. We rescheduled. We tested out technology. I just want to thank you for being there for us.
Tony, my pleasure. I appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Martin. So, people, this is Tony Sherman from Impact Teams Radio. We've had a great session today. There's been a lot of micro lessons and one or two large lessons there. If you take those, you add them to your skill set, and you practice them diligently over the next 6 months, my guarantee to you is you will be a better leader in 6 months than you are today. And until next week, this is Tony Sherman from Impact Teams Radio. Take care.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Now go and apply these few gems. Make the wisdom you have heard your own. If you want to be part of our launch success, then please go to impactteamsradio.com/love and tell the world. If you want more and never want to miss a beat, please go to impactteamsradio.com/subscribe. If you have 3 minutes, we would love to see a positive review on iTunes. And until next time, remember to act on what you've learned, and you'll be ahead of most of the world. Impact Teams Radio.